Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome to the SBI Podcast, a weekly broadcast dedicated to helping you make your number, but getting your peers to share with you how they make theirs. Today's topic is forecasting accuracy. My name is Greg Alexander. I'm the CEO of SBI, and I'm also your host for today's show. And joining me today is Evan Randall. Evan, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks, Greg. I am the Vice President of Sales Operations at Tableau Software.
And what does Tableau Software do?
Tableau Software is a business intelligence company that has built out a platform for visual analytics, dashboarding, things of that nature.
Okay, very good. All right, this interview is going to be different than our traditional approach, especially for our regular listeners and viewers. So, Evan, it's been a while since you've been on the show. I'm proud to say that we just crossed over 300,000 downloads.
Wow.
Yeah, which for us is pretty impressive. So we've got a kind of a regular audience here, and they might be used to my interviewing style. This is going to be a little different, so we're going to have some fun with this. So here's what we're going to do. I have a single question for Evan, and I'm going to ask Evan to break his answer into three parts. The first part of his answer will be covered in this segment, segment 1. The second part of his answer will be covered in segment 2, and the third part of his answer will be covered in segment 3. So why the change in interview format? Evan is doing some groundbreaking work in the area of forecasting accuracy, and his process warrants 3 segments. Today, think we're going to go narrow and deep. Okay, really, really deep on this particular topic. So drum roll, please. Here is the big question. So how are you driving forecasting accuracy?
So that can be taken very broadly, but we're going to go narrow here, Greg, and have a lot of fun with this. Working for an analytics company, I've really had the opportunity to work with some of the smartest in the business, from really understanding predictive modeling and statistics and clustering and regression analysis. And I've been able to put together some tools and processes for our sales reps to help them basically divide how they forecast our business into 4 pieces, and I'm going to focus on 3 of them. The 4 pieces are really having a robust sales process. I'll explain that really briefly because a lot of us know how to focus on that, and I could go hours talking about that. Forecasting individual deals and the tools involved with that and the questioning involved with that. Rep-level forecast accuracy, so when your reps are committing a number and when you're aggregating their deals up, being able to really understand if you think the forecast they're providing is good, bad, and also give them some tools to help them make better calls. And then finally, the third piece is overall executive management layer, vice president, director, them making their decisions on what they are going to roll up. And all these things together should lift your organization to the next level from a forecast accuracy perspective. So let me just jump into the first piece here. So, like I said, I'm going to briefly cover the sales process piece, but one thing you absolutely need is you need good data from when you're managing your pipeline and where deals are, and this is a pretty obvious answer here. I'm just going to give some really important things for you guys to think about when you are developing your sales process. You need it adopted so people don't put in crap data, so you got to keep it super, super simple. And as you're moving through the sales process, having clearly defined stage gates with, like a rep knows when they can move from one step to the other. And, what I'm saying everybody knows, but I in my career and working with so many customers at Tableau, I've noticed a lot of people have these really complicated sales processes that aren't well adopted, and it really starts to screw you from the very beginning, especially when you're trying to have good forecast accuracy. Yep. One other piece is just having really objective evidence when it comes to moving things through the sales process that's aligned with your buyer, right? Again, a lot of companies focus on, what activities have the sales reps done? Again, that kind of gets you in trouble because sales reps sometimes just move things along. Oh, I've done this, I've done that, but the customer really isn't there. So that doesn't really help you objectively identify how good or bad a deal is. So those are kind of what I like to think about. Just keep it super simple and have objective evidence from a sales process perspective. And those things will really help you enable that forecast accuracy. And what I mean by objective evidence, like documentation from the customer that they're at a certain point of the buying process. They're asking you certain questions that you've done a survey and you identify, okay, if they ask these questions, they're probably at this point of their buying process. And once you start to get that going a little, getting more adopted and your sales reps are entering information well, like that will start to help enable these next levels of sales forecasting. So let me jump into the first ones, really looking at individual deal forecasting. So I'm going to go right up the stack, individual rep manager. So from an individual deal forecasting perspective, it tends to, so many people focus on, well, how you feel about it. Do you feel good about this deal? Oh yeah, I feel great about this deal. I took this guy to lunch, and I've been on forecast calls where, 10 minutes is spent on a deal about what the guy ordered at lunch, and he was really happy and having a great time. And I'm gonna commit this deal. This is done, right? And there's no real process or rigor behind what they're doing from a forecast perspective. So one of the first pieces I try to put in place is a robust questioning process. Like, what questions does the manager need to ask to make sure that the rep knows what they're talking about, to give the manager a better idea if a deal is good or not? That's kind of on the more subjective side of the forecasting process for an individual deal, is to really give a manager confidence or lack of confidence on where a deal is.
So give me an example of maybe one or two of those subjective questions.
Understanding the title of who they're speaking with, right? For like Tableau, I mean, that it seems like a simple one. It's so funny how many reps I've heard asked. So the person that is your main contact, what is their title? And either I don't know or analyst, right?
Yeah.
And we all know analysts usually don't have the
can't buy a pencil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe if they're buying one license and they've got a P card or something, and we might get lucky there. But that's one. Maybe just understanding what the next step is. Like, what are you going to be doing next with this customer? What's the buying process? I think questions like that.
Okay.
So either they log it into Salesforce or your CRM, or the manager's asking a question in a deal review, one-on-one, or however your company does it. Another piece of that, I think, and that's to give the managers a little more objectivity as much as possible in, I would consider, a little more of a subjective process. One other tool that we've provided, and this is getting us to more of the analytics and statistical clustering side of this, is giving reps an understanding if we believe from a data perspective that their deal is either good or bad. And what do I mean by that? I mean taking dimensions like average or the time a deal has been open, or how long it's been in a specific stage, the size of the deal, the type of customer, industry, revenue, like a multi-dimensional look at this specific account. And we've gone and we've profiled a lot of these different dimensions, so we can say, we provided the reps with a tool that say either this deal is caution, right? This type of deal with these dimensions in it will close 2% of the time, and you're committing it. Blinking red light, right?
You are an outlier.
Yeah, exactly. Everything we try to give our reps in these sorts of tools is something to take action, and then a manager to have a truly objective conversation with their rep. Like this, based on our history here, we've been doing this since 2003. We've got great data, clustering these things together. This type of deal, the way it is today, will be won 10% of the time. What are you going to do about it? Why is this different than all those other deals we closed in our inside sales team or our outside sales team with healthcare companies, right?
Do you do that for every deal?
We have that for every single deal we have in our system. We have a tool for our reps that they can see this, whether we believe it's good or bad.
So this is fantastic. So I just want to make sure that I understand this. So I'm a rep. I'm in my Salesforce automation tool. I'm doing my opportunity population. I'm forecasting. I'm telling the company where a deal is in the sales process. And then the system itself, not an individual, if I'm understanding you correctly, is pushing to the salesperson, hey, you've got a 2% chance of winning this deal. Is that right?
They basically have a dashboard that has either a caution sign or a check mark next to the deal name, and then what percentage we think that deal is going to be won.
Wow. How long have you been doing this?
That has been going on for a year and a half now.
And when you look back in time, I mean, how predictive was it?
That's one area that it's just as we just continue to improve the model. And I can't say that we've done an amazing job of looking at that individual tool. I kind of take the whole thing in aggregate. If we're doing a good job at forecasting in general, I consider it working. Yep. But I mean, that's a great question, Greg. I would love to figure out how to go about doing that, like looking the day they predicted, because every day, if they change some dimensions on the opportunity itself, then the Tableau dashboard is going to give them something different, right?
Yep, exactly.
Depending on what dimensions. If they might be forecasting a $150,000 deal, and it's saying, no way, Jose, right? But they change that to one pro license that's $2,000. That might be good all day long.
Yep.
So I think it would be difficult. We're just trying to give them a little data-based nudges or guide rails to stay in so they can make a better decision as a rep.
All right. So this is probably a good spot for us to take a break, because I want to share something with the audience here. So what we just covered in this first segment really is the individual deal level forecasting. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about rep level forecasting. We just released our annual research report titled How to Make Your Number in 2017. So if you're listening to this podcast or watching the video, it's probably mid to late summer, which is when we released this. And let me tell you a little bit about what it is. So it's a beast. It's about 250 pages, believe it or not. And it's our documentation of everything we learned in the last 12 months. And it reflects what we believe to be the emerging best practices that have the highest correlation to executives making their numbers. And it was written for executive leadership teams inside of companies with aggressive revenue growth targets who have a lot on the line and not a lot of time to waste. And it's particularly useful when you're doing your annual planning. So if you're getting ready to head into the 2017 budget strategic planning process, you're going to want to read this because it will help you through that process. So to get a copy of it, go to sbi.tips/2017 workbook. I'll give that to you one more time. sbi.tips/2017 workbook. Now, why am I bringing this up right now? Beyond the obvious, I'm trying to sell you a piece of content, I guess, here, is one of the emerging best practices that we're seeing is this big data analytics applied to sales in the following ways. So first, you have descriptive analytics, which describes what's happened in the past. Second, you have diagnostic analytics, which says, why has this happened? Third, you have predictive analytics, which is what Evan was just talking about, which is, hey, if everything else stays the same based on history, this is what's likely going to happen in the future. And fourth is prescriptive analytics, which says, okay, so we just showed you that you got a 2% chance of winning this deal based on 13 years worth of history. You're an outlier. Why is this different? Now the rep or the manager, whoever is going to give you an answer. Now the question is, what do you do about it? Do you just delete the deal out of the system and don't waste any more time on it? Or what's the prescription? So what are you going to do to bring this deal back to the center of the cluster to give yourself a greater chance of winning? And we talk about this concept of prescriptive analytics a lot in the report. So if forecasting accuracy is of something of interest to you, as we just heard here with Evan's kind of remarkable story on how he's doing predictive analytics, you might want to get a copy of that. All right, enough of me talking. We're going to take a quick break. This is the SBI Podcast. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI Magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI Magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Welcome back. You're listening to the SBI Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Alexander, and today's guest is Evan Randall, the head of sales ops at Tableau. Today's topic is forecasting accuracy, and we are going narrow and deep today with Evan, giving us a three-part answer to a simple question. And that question is, how are you driving forecasting accuracy? The first part of Evan's answer was covered in segment 1, and he talked an awful lot about having a fantastic and well-adopted yet simple sales process so you can collect good data and use simple things like easy stage gates, etc. We also got into how to forecast at the individual deal level using some advanced predictive analytics, which is really fascinating. This segment, which is segment 2, we're going to pick up where we left off. And Evan, I'd ask you now to move towards your kind of your second big, step in the process, which is what you refer to as rep level accuracy.
Yes. So, once you get done with that individual piece, then you as a rep or you as a manager, when you're putting together your numbers, we break it into 3 pieces. So a lot of companies have this kind of your commit number, what you're going to, if you don't hit that number, you're fired. Then you're...
we call that the blood number.
Yeah, blood number, exactly. You're a middle ground one, what you think is most likely, what you subjectively, based on your feeling and all that, what your most likely number, and then your best case. If you run the table, everything works out in your favor. You ate Lucky Charms that morning, whatever. that's your happy ears version. That I again wanted to provide at this level another tool and process for these reps to be able to again focus in on what's going on in their pipeline and give them an idea of, like, based on where they stand, what are the chances to hit the number they're forecasting, both whether it's commit, most likely, or best case. And one thing that drives me nuts, and this might be slightly tangential, but you know how you have these weightings in any CRM tool. It's your first stage gate is 10%, your second is 20%,
yep. And they're set completely arbitrary.
Yeah, completely arbitrary. Yeah. And I swear, every company I've been at has started at, that's the forecast. Just multiply the item amount times that weighting. Oh, that's the forecast. And it just never is. And before I get into this next answer, I just want to set the stage that I just consider that the shape of the pipeline.
Yep, I agree.
I'll be saying shape, and that's all it tells me, yep. not the forecast. So we look at a few different things. So what we did before building out this tool is we went and did a research project very similar to what we did on the individual deal forecasting. We took a look at all of our different personas or seller types or roles, whatever you want to call them, in Tableau, like inside sales acquisition rep, existing business rep, outside rep, etc. And we basically profiled based on where your shape of your pipeline and gross size of your pipeline are. We wanted to provide the reps kind of a 90% confidence interval. And what that is if we take 90% of the samples in the data set that we're looking at, that 90% will hit their number, essentially, on the high end. So we gave them a range, so they have a dashboard that they can look at themselves individually, and based on the day in the quarter that they're at, it gives them from 10% to, it gives them the 90% confidence interval range of where, if they fall within that range, they could hit their number. Granted, right, if they're towards the bottom of the range, the chances that they're going to hit their number will be less. But this is where you get to the point where there's so many deals coming in and out of pipeline as you're moving through the quarter that we wanted to give them a range. And obviously, say, the answer now is you want to be towards the high end of that range or over, right? And again, this is just one of those, we want them to have an action to take each day, each week that they're looking at their pipeline, that they're talking about it with their manager. And we do that from a few different perspectives. We've got their just attainment, their expected value or shape of their pipeline, and then their gross pipeline amount. And we've got the confidence bands for each one of those based on their role, and we put their coverage for their gross pipeline, their coverage for their shape or weighted value, and then how they've attained. So depending on where all three of those fall, they might be back-end loaded. Hey, you got to pull some deals in, or it's going to be risky. So many people. I've seen so many people like, hey, I got the pipe to make this quarter, no problem. But if you wait to close all that pipe in the last week, you're going to run out of legal resources. You're going to run out of pre-sales resources. You're going to run out of your own time to get the deals closed. And again, we want people to know, oh, wow, I'm actually a little back-end loaded here. I better start closing some deals, or maybe I have to shrink some deals or push some deals out and really focus to be able to get to my number.
Let me ask you a few questions about this. So the rep level forecasting, is this simply a roll-up of the deal level forecasting associated with the rep? Or are you also, because you mentioned role several times, are you factoring into your statistical formula, your predictive model, if you will, things like experience level, tenure, location, things like that? Or is it just a roll-up of the individual deals?
No, it's not the role of the individual deals. It is actually their, depending on their tenure. So we have, we took all tenured people. We took basically our tenured reps and the 90% confidence interval of those people that hit their numbers and gave those ranges.
Okay.
So people would know to be a person that's going to hit their number, they need to be in this range.
Right.
And we did that. We added a region dimension. It was like region, role, and tenure were the main dimensions in there. And we took attainment as of that day, attainment of quotas as of that day in the quarter, shape or weighted value of your pipeline, coverage that day of the quarter, and then total gross pipeline on that day of the quarter, and show them where they sit in each of those three bands.
Yep.
And then we've done some training around, depending on where those fall in and out of the bands, what action you should take. And I'll save talking about that because that also falls into the manager, VP, director level forecast action. And I'll talk about some of the actions that we can take, and it's very similar between what a rep should do and what a management team or a director's team should focus on. So we really try to, again, help them determine what they're going to do based on where they fall, and give the managers, when they're having these one-on-ones and these pipeline reviews, to have objective conversations. Like, you're committing to a number, and when you enter that commitment into the parameter on this tool, and you're falling below the 90% confidence interval, you're probably not going to get your number. Mm-hmm. But even if you're at the midline, yes, you're probably a little safer than others, but let's try to get you to the top. So there's always something you can do to make the probability of success more. Let's figure out how to get you further towards the top of this band. Yep. And it's something you can look at and observe every single day. We give them the entire quarter band. So not only for that day, red and green, we give them a view so they can see how those bands change as you get further in the quarter. And as you can imagine, as you get closer to the quarter, those bands widen a little bit. Yep. Because that's when, as it gets a little more volatile. But early in the quarter, that's really when you make your quarter, right? And we really want to focus on people being on the high end of that band and staying on the high end of that band. And what plan are you going to put into the action with your manager to make that happen?
Okay, question for you. So what you just described there at the rep level, in the consulting world, we call that bright spot analysis. You're basically studying history. You know the outcome you want. You're drawing a circle around where in history that outcome actually happened. That's the bright spot. And you dissect that, and you think about all the possible variables that led to that positive bright spot outcome. You then contrast that to where the outcome did not happen. Okay, so the direct opposite of that. So what are the variables in that sample set? And when I compare those two things, what's different? Sometimes I find organizations, when they look at just the variables that led to success, and they don't contrast that with the variables that led to a lack of success, the model isn't as accurate as you want it to be. So did you also look at where failure took place?
You know, that is a great question. I had I kind of laid out my vision to my team.
Yeah.
And, that's a great question.
Well, something to think about. Yeah, it really is. We, believe it or not, when we've done this, we see like a 20% swing in accuracy. So if you haven't done that, go check on it. To the audience, make sure when you're doing bright spot analysis, which is what Evan is doing here, that's our fancy consulting term for it anyways, add to that where failure took place and make sure you contrast those two things. All right, this is a good spot for us to take a break. When we come back, Evan's going to share with us his third component of this, and this will be our last segment, which is how to roll this up to the executive management layer and forecast accurately, with the executives. Before we jump to the commercial break, here's something of value to you, audience members. We just came out with a new app and a new website, and these allow you to create an account and personalize your experience with us. So select how often you want to receive our content, in what format, and on what topic. So download the SBI app from Apple's App Store, or go to our new website at salesbenchmarkindex.com/register. Stick around, we'll be right back. This is our last break. You're listening to the SBI Podcast.
Do you have too many things to do and not enough time to do them? Is finding time to learn best practices almost impossible? The SBI Podcast is your solution. Turn time spent exercising, commuting, and traveling into productive learning time with a subscription to the SBI Podcast. SBI Podcast listeners get unique insight into real-world sales and marketing issues through interviews with your industry peers every week. Find us on iTunes by searching for Sales Benchmark Index Podcast and subscribe today.
Okay, welcome back, audience members. This is our last segment with Evan Randall of Tableau on the topic of forecasting accuracy. I'm Greg Alexander, and I'm your host and CEO of SBI. We are 2/3 through a 3-part answer to a single question of how are you driving forecasting accuracy. So let's hear the rest of this exciting emerging best practice. So Evan, if you wouldn't mind, can we pick up where you left off, which I believe now we have to get into the executive management layer. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right, so the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks, Greg. So, as I try to think about everything we're doing here in all of our practices, I look at it as it's just one full group of things you do to increase your forecast accuracy. There's not one thing that's just going to be the silver bullet to start making great decisions on where you're going to end to be able to report to the street or whoever you report up to.
That is so true.
And I know. So it's such an art, too. There's a lot of science that I'm talking about, but when you get at this executive level, you need to take all these inputs and talk to your constituents, talk to your leaders, and then make the best decision you can. So there's not one model that's going to spit it out, and that's awesome. Just go use that one, right? I wish there were.
Yep.
I'd be very wealthy if there were. So this next part that I talk about is how do we provide a little bit of help to our executive leaders. It's probably the hardest place to be, and you're so far from the front lines, and really getting deep on deals as much as these executive leaders love getting deep on deals. Sometimes it really doesn't give them the perspective of their entire business. Yep. Whether you're a global leader or domestically in the U.S., there's just too much going on, especially at some of these larger companies. So very similar to what we do at the rep level, giving these predictive models, we do it for our leaders as well. But we also give them the ability to do a little more what-if scenarios as they're trying to decide what they're actually going to commit. So we've provided them with a workflow or just it's a tool, a dashboard. It's obviously in Tableau that has 4 different pieces. Piece number 1 is just an overall view of their business, their attainment, how they're performing, their coverages, their teams roll up, their direct level beneath them, that roll up, and they can go as low down as they want to see what was rolled up at each level, what they committed to the previous week, a quick snapshot of their pipeline visual so they can see the shape of their pipeline, what the deal-based roll-up is from a commit, most likely best-case deal-based roll-up. Like I said, they can compare and contrast that to the gut roll-up from the field based on all these tools we gave those guys, so it makes them better so they can trust that gut roll-up a little bit more. And they're able to have a conversation with their team when they're doing these high levels, like, okay, here's what the business looks like from a roll-up and a deal perspective. Then they can go to the next piece and look at these historical trends. And these are those models that are built off of how are we doing based on attainment, and what is that projecting? So if we look at the last 4 quarters, how have we attained up into this day of the quarter? Are we below the trend? Are we above the trend? Are we in the pack? So again, giving them a little bit of a feel one way or the other on what their forecast looks like. And then the middle one, very similar to the rep level, is that expected value, that weighted pipeline. Where are we covering our quota and our forecast from that perspective comparative to the trend, and then the active pipeline or gross pipeline amount. And what we provided them is we provide them with a parameter where they can start playing with it and do what-if analysis and see where the trends move in these 3 different models. And it's really amazing, like giving people these leaders, rather than just the red and green like we give our reps for the deal and for the rep level forecast when they're aggregating their numbers up, giving the leaders the full view of the entire quarter, and so they can see how the trend moves and where it inflects and what happens during, seasonally. One thing we've learned at Tableau is just the human brain works so much well looking at patterns and things like that rather than just a crosstab of numbers. Mm-hmm. So giving them this what-if analysis where they can, if I change this and we really kick ass in pipeline creation next week, we'll be back in the money. So I'm going to be a little aggressive. I'm going to forecast a little bit higher than I normally would because I think next week's going to be awesome, right? So we want them to use that human element with these tools and this what-if scenario analysis to be able to make a really great decision, and they're able to do this for their best case, most likely, and commit numbers. Then the next piece is, there's so many forecast discussions when a person's looking at a trend and they see that trend line just drop the current quarter. Like, why did that drop? Why did our coverage drop 6% in weighting? In some cases, that's really bad, right? So the next step of this process is looking at their pipeline change. And we've provided them a visual way to look at their pipeline change over the quarter so far. And then depending on what day threshold, they can look from the beginning to today. They can look at a certain week. They can look at a certain 3-day difference. But we will profile what happened to their pipeline during those days. What deals fell out? What deals got pushed? What deals got pushed out of the month, out of the quarter? What deals changed in size? What deals got closed, lost, et cetera. So they know exactly what happened to their pipeline, and they can drill down all the way to the deal and then all the way back up to the region, the manager, director, VP, whatever. So that, again, gives them a little more confidence that they understand the ebbs and flows if they want to. They don't have to go there. That's why it's the 3rd step of the process, right? If they need to drill in more during a call or when they're just doing their own forecasting, they can do that. And then the last one is just the straight deals. Like, here are the deals in your pipe. Here's all the information you could possibly want about them from the CRM, the next step, the implementation date, the names of the people on there. It's all in one place for them to be able to make their best decision. And the expectation is that when they're running their final forecast call before they lock on whatever day they're responsible for locking, depending on what level they're at, they go through this to make the best decision they can, and they lock on their commit, most likely in best case number, and submit that. So the hope is, and we have been within probably the last 8 quarters from a bookings perspective, around 5% in forecast accuracy, and our goal is to stay within plus or minus 7%.
Wow, that's
on
fantastic.
either side.
Let me ask you a couple of questions on this. So in order to establish a trend line that's reliable, you need lots and lots and lots of data inputs, and which if you're a transactional sales force, that's easy to do. But if you're a classic B2B sales force where 1 or 2 mega deals can just blow the trend line completely to smithereens. So do you guys have, do you make or miss the number every quarter based on a few large transactions, or is it a situation where you're doing, thousands of smaller transactions?
We're very much a hybrid, and thank you for reminding me about one of my points I wanted to make. So if you know Tableau, we can sell an individual license for $2,000 or all the way up to enterprise license agreements for millions, right? So it's all of the above. We've got a very strong transactional or run rate sort of business, both on enterprise and commercial, and then we have those big mega deals. What we do in those cases, once you're at, especially at the director level where a mega deal could wipe you out or make you the hero, is those trends, we give them the predictions of the trends for the smaller transaction deals, and then basically add the deals for most likely best case and commit onto the top of that so they can get their range for the big deals.
So you isolate it.
One thing I've been wanting to do that I did at a previous company was a Monte Carlo simulation.
Yep.
And because we have gone and profiled the percentage probabilities of these deals, I want to use those and run 10,000 simulations on those bigger deals and see where the bell curve is and try to find a midline there where the most samples came back and add that in to give them a little, again, another way to look at their business, because we are tight as hell on the transaction side.
Yeah.
It's definitely the bigger deals that make or break you. And I came from more of like a manufacturing with mega deals and felt like the Monte Carlo simulations, once we got an idea of what percentage probability the deals are going to close at and run it through the Monte Carlo, that we got a little bit tighter range there for our bigger deals. So that's something that we haven't gone to the next level on, but in my vision, when at Tableau we don't get much time to do everything we want, but I would love for that to be that next step to help us with those bigger deals.
All right, very good. So Evan, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for doing a deep dive on forecasting accuracy with me. So appreciate you being on the show, man.
Absolutely. Enjoy it.
All right, and I want to thank the SBI audience for tuning in. If you want to learn more about forecasting accuracy and the other emerging best practices top leaders are deploying to make their numbers, go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/register and create an account, and we'll push out the information that's most important to you. But until next time, as always, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.